environment and disaster management in GS3 is a high impact area where you can have a high scoring potential from a lower input. NDMA guidelines are very important part of it. When I talk about the disaster management, the basic cycle of disaster management is the static part. The basic idea of vulnerability, hazard, capacity, response. In addition to this, the land degradation is a major issue. Just give a glance revision in the last 1 week. Okay, so you're talking about let's say ozone depletion. How much proportion has underwent ozone depletion? We're talking about the impact of climate change. Good evening, everyone. I hope all of you are doing fine. So I'm here talking about environment and disaster management. One last final strategy for the last week and final advice from my end. So let's go ahead. So to begin with, these are the topics. Okay, so particularly these topics are the one which are related to environment and disaster management. I would like to highlight this. The environment topic includes conservation, environmental pollution, degradation, environmental impact assessment. The disaster management topic includes disaster and disaster management. Okay, these are the main focus areas in which we have the subject of environment and disaster management here, and this is part of your GS3. GS3. In addition to this, the other two topics which I have highlighted, those are the topics that are related to geography, which is linked directly and indirectly to your geography subject as a whole. Okay, so because that is what you would have studied as part of your GS1, that is linked here. But otherwise, if I have to talk about the environment, here it is, and there is also some environment related topics in your GS1. So talking about the overall scoring potential of this subject, environment and disaster management. Okay, so let me just see. So this is the number of questions which have been asked from the subject of environment and disaster management together in the last 13 years, 12 years, sorry. Okay, so on an average, you can expect a minimum of 50 marks. Okay, so minimum of 50 marks, and it can go up to 60 marks. You can say 50 to 60 marks are usually asked between the 50 to 60 marks are usually asked in the GS3, General Studies 3, from the subject of environment and disaster management. Last year, there were a total of 50 marks. Okay, so from this topic, there were 3 questions related to environment and 2 questions related to 2 questions related to environment and 2 questions related to disaster management. Fine. And there is always some overlapping with science and technology, because some of the disasters appear to be like something which is related to the science and technology related. Okay, so there is always overlapping with that. So that is the overall weightage. Talking about the nature. Okay, so let me show. So these are the different topics which are part of your environment. Okay, so we have a total of 6 different topics. Okay, so one is ecology, second one is biological diversity, third one is all different types of degradation, pollution. Okay, so climate change, global warming, ozone depletion, all of these degradation, and then comes environmental conservation. Okay, all the efforts to so protect the environment and the initiatives over there, and then there is a sustainable development. Okay, initiatives for sustainable development, and then particularly EIA is one important topic which is directly mentioned in the syllabus. Okay, and also briefly about the environmental ethics. Okay, these are the major topics in environment. And in disaster management, the first part is about the basic concepts, where we discuss regarding the basic ideas related to the disaster, such as what is hazard, what is risk, what is disaster, what is vulnerability, what is capacity, what do you mean by disaster management cycles, what are the different stages within the disaster management cycles, and what are the different steps within that, what do you mean by so mitigation, what is preparedness, what is response, rehabilitation, reconstruction. All these terms come under this, all these basic ideas come under this. The idea of disaster management, the concept of disaster management. Second thing is initiatives. What are the various different initiatives which we have taken to fulfill this idea of disaster management in India as well as international? In international level, we have 3 conferences. Okay, in India, we have a National Disaster Management Act, National Disaster Management Policy, and also plan and few important programs and schemes taken. In addition to this, the third major part is the different types of disasters which occur in India. Okay, so the important disasters and how we are going to manage them. What are the measures which are required to be taken, and what are the suggestions given by NDMA in this context? NDMA guidelines are very important part of it. These are the basic sections here. Now talking about the scoreability and the nature of the questions. We can see combining disaster management and environment, we have a total of let's say 14 questions. Okay, so a total of 14 questions were asked in the last 3 years. And if you take the last 12 years, okay, so in the last 12 years we can see that a total of 54 questions have been asked, right? So I'll come to the division, which one is more important. Talking about the nature, so you can see most of the questions are related to the area where you have to integrate the static with the current affairs part. Whether it is environment or disaster management, maximum questions have come from this part only. There are around 30% of the questions which are directly static from both environment as well as disaster management. There are very few questions which are directly only current affairs. This is something which is a misconception to say that environment and disaster management is completely current affairs only. You don't have to read anything else. Just read from the current affairs and go and write, so you will get the marks like that. This is something which is so a myth, and you have to have a solid back so support of this static part. Okay, when I say static part, what exactly is this? The basic concepts. When I talk about the disaster management, the basic cycle of disaster management is the static part. The basic idea of vulnerability, hazard, capacity, response, okay, so the different mitigation measures. So this is what is static part. If you have this basic idea, it becomes very easy. For that matter, even the National Disaster Management Act and its provision is also static part. Okay, so that is the idea of static part, right? Like which has been there, which you have to study it definitely as part of your so preparation. So that part, when you club with the current affairs, there comes the section of environment and disaster management. Okay, so that is the nature. It's not completely static, not completely current affairs. It's the mix of both. Talking about the different sections, the most important section, there are 3 sections: pollution and degradation, which includes climate change. Okay, so because climate change is also part of it, and climate change becomes a very significant part of it, because in the last few years there is definitely one question on climate change. Other than this, the second most famous important area here is energy, and third one is disaster management. 3 major sections, definitely you can expect a question. बाकी सारा जो सेक्शन में क्वेश्चन आ सकते हैं या नहीं आ सकते, बट यहाँ पर तो पक्का आएगा. Okay, so there is some questions on conservation. Okay, so wetland conservation, biodiversity conservation. Okay, so and so prevention of degradation, all of this. And there's some idea of sustainable development. Agriculture के ऊपर हो सकता है, mobility के ऊपर हो सकता है. Okay, so or even the urbanization के ऊपर हो सकता है. That is sustainability. Then EIA तो बहुत simple सा topic है. So in this topic you just thoroughly prepare and go. You will definitely have a question. You have to prepare what is EIA, what are the stages and the cycle of EIA, and what are the present rules of EIA. India में क्या क्या rules है, ये basic idea रखे जाओ तो ये most of the questions को यहाँ पर cover हो जाएगा. ठीक है. And disaster management का basic idea तो मैंने already दे दिया, so definitely it's a very important area. So considering the nature of the questions and the way questions are taken up from different sections, environment and disaster management becomes a significantly highly scoring area. See, so you don't have to do so that kind of effort which you do it for other static part. For example, in geography, you have to give a lot of effort to give it thorough coverage. In environment and disaster management, it's not required. You need to identify the high impact areas and do some efforts over there. So there the returns are going to be very, very high. You need to target that. So environment and disaster management in GS3 is a high impact area where you can have a high scoring potential from a लोअर इनपुट. मतलब जितना मतलब कम इनपुट देके आप हाई स्कोरिंग कर सकते हो. एंड ट्रस्ट मी, ऐसे क्वेश्चंस यहाँ पर ऐसे भी लगता है कि ये तो बिना प्रिपरेशन भी हम आंसर कर सकते हैं, या अच्छे से प्रिपेयर करने के बाद में ये पता नहीं है, ऐसे भी क्वेश्चंस होते हैं. बट स्टिल इट डजंट मीन दैट यू विल गो विदाउट प्रिपरेशन. जो प्रीलिम्स में पढ़ा था उसी के ऊपर ही लिख के आएंगे, ये नहीं करना है. सो थोड़ा सा हाई इम्पैक्ट एरियाज जो मैंने आइडेंटिफाई किया है, एनर्जी का हो गया. सो देयर इज ऑल्सो द टॉपिक ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज एंड डिग्रेडेशन एंड डिजास्टर मैनेजमेंट. इतना मतलब इस एरिया में एटलीस्ट फोकस करते हुए ये का हो गया. तो यहाँ पर हम थोड़ा सा मेहनत करो तो आपका मतलब जो स्कोर तो पक्का हो जाएगा. ओके, सो रिमेंबर इट इज ए लो इनपुट हाई इम्पैक्ट एरिया. सो इफ आई टू टॉक अबाउट द इंपॉर्टेंट थीम्स फॉर दिस ईयर, जो मेरा रिकमेंडेशन है, मेरा प्रेडिक्शन है इन द कंटेक्स्ट ऑफ बायोडाइवर्सिटी. सो ट्राई टू फोकस मोर ऑन मैन एनिमल कॉन्फ्लिक्ट, one thing which has been in news. Basic idea develop karo with example and recent issues, man animal conflict and recent issues of man animal conflicts. So in addition to this, biodiversity conservation efforts, different methods of conservation. Okay, so whether it is the biosphere hotspots or biosphere reserves, or the idea of wetland conservation, lake conservation. Okay, तो ये सारा जो conservation efforts है वो वहाँ पर थोड़ा सा focus करना आपको. In addition to this, in the topic of ecology, if I have to talk about again, it's about the wetlands. And in addition to this, I can give you a session on biogeochemical cycles. In environmental degradation, definitely you have to give some importance on air pollution. It's a topic which has been in news consistently. Okay, so last year there was a good number of questions, last year as well, on water pollution. I can predict something on air pollution at least. Okay, so and definitely climate change and its impact, the recent impacts of climate change. In addition to this, the land degradation is a major issue. Okay, so you can focus upon all the major uh, issues related to land degradation, whether it's deforestation or desertification or all the so the current so causes of land degradation. Talking about conservation, you have to focus more on the conservation efforts of climate change. All UNFCCC, recent UNFCCC COPs. Okay, so that is definitely, and Indian legislation, the laws which have underwent changes in the recent times, whether it is the Wildlife Protection Act and Forest Conservation Act, okay, so as well as the Biodiversity Act, and also yeah, so this would be fine. And some of the biodiversity conservation efforts like Project Cheetah and Project Tiger, okay, so they are in news for quite some time. Talking about sustainability, definitely energy. I have highlighted this in your paper one also. Okay, here we are talking about renewable source of energy. Okay, so here particularly the solar energy, wind energy, and geothermal energy. Few recent pilot projects are there. Okay, so in addition to that, any recent initiatives. Okay, so the international level initiatives and national level initiatives from energy, try to focus and try to develop a broad idea of India's energy mix. What are the different sources and how much is produced from which source? Okay, so in addition to this, agriculture is one more prediction I can make. Okay, sustainable agriculture practices like organic farming, natural farming, and few of the recent initiatives related to that. Okay, so and how the management is done over there. What is manure management? What is so nutrient management, like that. And EIA, it's something which is exhausted. Okay, so I may not be able to predict anymore, because so you have to just study what is EIA, what are the methodology of EIA, and the recent rules. Okay, all of these are already covered. In disaster management, I would say the national initiatives, the recent changes made in NDMA Act. National Disaster Management Act has underwent recent changes, amendments. What is the original act? What are the changes and why it was required? You have to study in more detailed manner. Okay, so in addition to this, the recent initiatives by the government in the context of disaster management. Okay, so the recent programs and initiatives you need to focus upon. And other than this, the disasters, important disasters which are relevant for this year. Okay, so one is landslide. Of course, I have given this in the paper one also, and cloud burst and flash floods, GLOF. In addition to this, the cyclone is an important disaster. So in addition to this, the man-made disasters like stampede, and heat wave or cold wave. So in addition, we can say the chemical disasters. Okay, so drought is another thing which we can predict here. Okay, so these are the major predictions for this year. Ensure that you have covered at least these in the last week. If at all you have already covered, try to focus more on this and revise this. So the major challenges one would face in the topic of the environment and disaster management. The first important challenge is related to the current affairs and integration with the integration of current affairs with your answers, because so many of the topics are taken and picked up from the current affairs and the questions are asked in a static context. But if you don't know the current event, so you will not be able to answer. Only it's very much necessary that you please so revise the current affairs which you had read till now. If not, you cannot read anything new. If at all you will, if at all you already not covered few things, don't worry about that. At least what you have read till now, so just give a glance revision in the last 1 week. So that is going to do some job. So at least if you remember the event, remember the so major aspect of the event, you will be able to write something. Okay, so current affairs is a must. Most of the events in the current affairs only are picked up and asked in environment and disaster management. Please keep that in mind. And not doing revision, again I told you, so the current affairs you had read, you had not revised, that is a major challenge. And the static part, some basic aspects of static part. Okay, so for example, some of the basic ideas. So okay, so what is a wetland? What are the functions of a wetland? What is smog? How smog is formed, right? Or what is the mechanism of ozone depletion? Okay, so all these basics you have to be thorough. You don't have to remember the data. You don't have to go through so too many exhaustive collection of the information which you read is as part of your prelims. Here it has to be so quick revision of basic concepts. And not focusing on the static part is again a major challenge. I already told you most of the questions link static with the current affairs. That connection you have to show. Even if the question is related to the current affairs, you have to link that static part. That linking will make your answers better. Add some good facts and information. Last 1 week, please try to revise the important facts and information, whether it is related to the disaster, important disaster. Make a note of this. Okay, so in that you have to make sure you have made a list of suggestions given by NDMA. Okay, so whatever the disasters I had given there over there, so try to add the guidelines given by NDMA. So in each disaster there will be at least 4, 5, 5, 6 guidelines are there. So those guidelines have to be, so just remember the heading and try to write that in your answer. Okay, that is very important. And in addition to that, try to remember few facts and data. So for example, if you're talking about environmental issues, air pollution ka baat kare ho, so try to remember some data related to air pollution. Okay, so you're talking about let's say ozone depletion. How much proportion has underwent ozone depletion? We're talking about the impact of climate change. Okay, so what is the global average in the sea surface temperature rise? Like this. This facts you have to remember and try to write it in the beginning of the answer only. That will do a lot of so change in your answer, because that will totally change the way you are actually writing the answer. If a person reads that with a good important information or a fact, definitely his perspective towards the answer will be totally different. Try to incorporate in your introduction or conclusion. Again, PYQ analysis, I have given the same suggestion for geography also. Okay, so there in the last 1 week, rather than writing any full length test or any kind of sitting and writing complete 3 hours of so paper, so if you can write, if you are confident, go ahead with that, so no issues. If you are not confident, if you're finding issue or stress, so definitely try to practice PYQ. Pick up random questions from PYQ related to environment and disaster management, try to write the answer. That is also a good practice, answer writing practice. At the same time, it is going to be a good confidence booster. Okay, so and you will also understand the pattern. Okay, आपको कैसे pattern आ रहा है वो भी समझ आ जाएगा. So now talking about the final strategy for environment and disaster management, as I told you, both these sections are a very high impact section. The time which you are going to give is less compared to the marks which you are going to get here. And many of the students just ignore this. They think whatever they had studied earlier will be sufficient over there. So don't do that mistake. Okay, so capitalize on this, make the best. And the score in environment and disaster management will boost your score in GS3. Usually GS3 people score less in the last few years, that is what we are seeing. So but if at all you have done well in environment and disaster management, that definitely that is going to boost your score in GS. Okay, so and time management is again a major issue in GS3. So because many questions are little bit lengthy, many questions are related to current affairs and all, you have to write more over there. Try to keep a balance on the time as well as space part. Okay, so if you are going to maintain this balance, and if you are going to be calm and composed during this entire process, because so by the time you are writing GS3, so you're already given 3 papers, you're feeling exhausted, right? So try to maintain that energy, high energy, because this is a marathon. You have to run consistently, right? So try to maintain that high energy, so definitely you will be able to so cross the hurdles. Okay, so any challenge, any issue which comes up, okay, so try to remember this is your last stage. You have to just hold on and give your best. Fine. So I wish you all the best to all of you. Thank you.